Yo, yo, yo. Hello. Welcome to the live stream. Sculpting this Arachnid warrior from Starship Troopers, and I don't know why I'm talking like this. But in any case, hello. Where I left off last week is I was doing some poly painting, so I'm going to continue doing that because we're almost done, really. Just got to finish this part right here. Do the legs and a little bit of touch up. So let's see if we can get all that done tonight. Then we can prepare it for rendering here in ZBrush using Redshift. And so, a little piece of chocolate here and get started. Crunchy. So I left off last week. You can see I kind of did these little flamey things in the side here. Let's get a reference up here. Kind of hot rod style flames, like we see in a lot of the reference here. So it needs a little bit of a touch up, just to make them a little bit more angular and aggressive. So I'm going to pull up my poly paintbrush, and I'm going to hold the shift key, turn off Z add, so that my blur brush is now my smooth brush is now a blur brush. Let's get a nice little chunky alpha in here. Just something, I think maybe let's try the gradient here just for fun. I'm going to select this dark gray color just by hovering over this and pressing C. I'm going to press O to bring up the focal shift slider and just put the focal shift to a negative number so it's not so soft. S for the brush size, bring down the brush size. And I'm not using symmetry because I want these to be asymmetrical. Oh, and I have polypaint layers, so let's go in here to layers and make sure that I have the layers in record mode. There we go. And now I can start painting on this. Ingredients making things kind of smudgy. I think that's too smudgy, so let's do just a straight up square alpha. And bring some of this lighter gray in here. Maybe bring down the RGB intensity. I think the other thing is maybe bring a color spray, but bring the placement really far down and set the color variance down to a low color just to make the brush a bit more interesting. I mean, I like it to be a little bit messy. I don't want things to be too perfect. And something like that's kind of nice. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to this alpha right here and pick that kind of a lighter gray color. Just kind of go over the edges here. Let's bring up the stroke placement a little bit. Turn off lazy mouse. I don't need it when I'm painting. I'm actually going to bake all the layers because I think the layers are throwing me off a little bit. I know some layers with poly paint. Yeah. Sometimes when you do poly paint with layers, you get this. It's some kind of bug. That's why I generally don't like to use poly paint with layers. So what I'm going to do, I mean, it's unfortunate, but the only thing I can do is reload the object, because even if I try and undo it, it's okay. It's kind of a weird bug. Let's see if I can. Okay, that time, no bug, so that's good. I used to do that all the time, which is why I wasn't crazy about layers, especially with poly painting. They could be kind of buggy, but at least this time I was able to undo it and fix it. But I was just noticing as I was painting on here, the gray over the yellow, if you notice a few minutes ago, it was kind of smudging the yellow around in a really weird way. It's not something you normally get with the poly paint brushes, and I suspect that has something to do with the layers. So now I'm not getting that problem anymore. It's behaving like I would expect. So sorry about that, but hey, that's how you learn. So what I'm going to do now is do a little bit of masking and bring back some noise on top of this, so it looks a bit more organic. So I'll go into masking, and let's do mask by cavity. And I'm going to invert the mask and hide it, and just throw in some gray. Do color, fill object, just something like that. Make it kind of grainy. Let's do mask by smoothness. And I'm going to invert the mask and hide it, and this time I'm going to paint just here and there. Just to give it some kind of weathering. This weekend, went on some interesting trips with my wife and daughter. We went and visited some of the World War II bunkers that are along the Atlantic coast here in France, German bunkers, the occupation. And then we went to a little war museum, World War II museum, and it's just this little old farmhouse or fishing house or farmhouse next to the water that this guy had converted into a World War II museum. This is on Ile de Rome, the island near here. And the museum was filled with model tanks, plastic model tanks, German tanks, American tanks, Russian tanks, and all these huge dioramas that this guy put together. And it reminded me that, when I was a kid, my older brother Neil was obsessed with building model tanks, World War II tanks, and building them and painting them. And I just remember how he showed me the techniques that he used for painting the tanks, to create that weathering effect. A lot of it was, painting the colors on and then going over with a little bit of thinned out paint, like in a paper towel, some paint thinner, a darker color to get that kind of weathering effect, and then dry brush effects and that kind of stuff. It sort of reminds me of what I'm doing here, what I'm trying to do in ZBrush, to create some kind of interesting weathering. Do mask by curvature. Let's do mask by peaks and valleys. And I kind of like this kind of charcoal look. Let me hide the mask and bring back that gray. In some of these areas, get that kind of interesting kind of charcoal look. I don't know if you can see it, but it's a mixture of dark blacks and gray splotches and stuff. Kind of a cool look. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a light yellow, almost white. I'm going to choose this single dot alpha, and let's bring the placement up a little bit and the RGB intensity up. And then let's clear the mask. And there we go. You can see it right here. And I'm going to paint over this yellow with that. Those little dots. Just to bring in a little bit more of that texture. And kind of just have a little spreading out into the darker areas. I think I might make it even lighter. I like the way this looks right here. And of course, my brother Neil, when he was, he did model tanks for a long time, World War II tanks. And of course, Star Wars kind of took over. I remember he did this amazing model of the Millennium Falcon. It was a really good model set too. It wasn't like the Kenner toys with the weird scale. It was like a very nice plastic model. It had lights in the engine and LED lights so you could hook up to batteries. And he did such an amazing job painting that thing, getting the weathering to look just like it did in the movie. It was absolutely fantastic. I don't know what happened to all those models. I'd have to ask them, but I have a feeling they're lost to time. Do a little bit of blurring here to make it look nice and blotchy. Looks pretty cool. Now is a good time to save. All right. I think that part's looking pretty good for now. We can always come back and play with it a little bit more later, but I think it's all right. So let's save this. Let's move on to some of the legs here. Let's do these guys. They look pretty cool. So, most of our reference looks like these guys are following the same kind of idea as the legs. We could throw in some red in there. I think. Oh, there's some red markings right there. That's kind of interesting. Well, I think I'm going to focus on the arms first, and then I'll come back to that. This one has some red on there, which I think looks pretty cool. So I'll do that. I might come back later and add some red to this part, but I want to get as much done as I possibly can before I go back and do that. So I'm going to select this subtool. Let's select our darkish gray and fill that guy. Whoops. I'm going to go in here with do our masking trick. I know it's tedious, but it works. It's effective. So I'm going to fill these in with a dark black. It might be too much. Let's clear the mask, maybe blur that a little bit. Okay. And then let's do mask by smoothness. I'm going to invert that. Maybe put in a lighter gray here. It's too strong. Mask by curvature. Not much there. Mask by peaks and valleys. Okay, so basic coat there. So what I might do is let's do this alpha, get a black going, and should have symmetry on, right? By the way, I just put a new video this morning on my YouTube channel, Bloopatone, talking about dynamic symmetry and how that can be really helpful, especially when sculpting something that is already posed. Like I used the example of some scan data that I was working on of this cherub. I know, not a bug. Big surprise. Just showing how dynamic symmetry can help when you're working on like facial features, and because I always have a hard time trying to sculpt with symmetry off and doing like eyes and nose and stuff like that. I don't have that talent that some people do for being able to sculpt perfect faces without symmetry. But I'm sort of more of a CG artist, so I tend to sculpt in a very unposed kind of thing, like I'm doing with this guy, and then pose after I'm done. It's a very visual effects way of going about it. Let's clear off the masks, and now I'm going to do some markings here. I don't like that. This one's okay, but not quite enough. That's all right. Everybody's got a different way of doing it. I like something like this that is not just flames, it sort of highlights parts of the limbs here. That's the movie, I guess. There's Johnny Rico. So it's more of a pattern there. And this is sort of in between. Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, I kind of like this idea right here. It's just a little bit more intentional. Kind of funny. I made my jaws really, really thin. I was just noticing some of them have a much thicker, but you know, to each his own. So I'm going to start again with symmetry because I'm lazy, and then I'll make it asymmetrical once I've got the basic stuff on. And I'm going to go with like a square alpha and bring the placement down so we get something like this. Another thing that's fun is I can go into the brush. Whoops, that's got to auto save. Well, I'll take a moment to drink some tea here. And I'm going to go in brush and under modifiers, or actually I want to do twist. Yeah, I'm going to turn up the twist rate a little bit because this will spin that alpha around, giving it more of a nasty edge there. So we're at 3 million. I'm going to leave it there. It's probably enough, but let's see. I'm going to subdivide it one more time, which is going to get up to 15 million. That's probably too much, but whatever. What the heck? What's the worst that could happen, right? I'm going to create these kind of bands here. I'm going to bring in some of that sharp triangular motif as well. Flamies. Excuse me. All right, and then the benefits of polypainting before going into substance. I do it because I like the ZBrush brushes for applying color. Because I could take advantage of the, I mean, you could take advantage of masking and all that kind of stuff, obviously, in substance as well, and create all kinds of cool masks in there based on curvature and such. But what I like about ZBrush is I can get the colors on here like super fast. I don't have to worry about UVs or anything like that. I can worry about UVs later or change the UVs as much as I want. And like I said, the brushes are the main thing. Like I like the way I can turn the smooth brush into a blur brush. And then I like the types of masks, the cavity masks, and all that kind of stuff. But generally speaking, for this project, I'm not exporting it to Substance. I'm doing everything here in ZBrush, just because it's a ZBrush live demo. But if I was going to bring it in Substance, I would make UVs, and then I would export this base color texture, based on however I set up the UVs, bring that into Substance, and use that as sort of a bottom layer to add even more detail on top of that. That's basically why I like it. I'm showing that my audio is working fine on this side, so I don't know if there's any issues with the audio. Hold on a second. Let me ask my assistant. Yeah, I think, because I had a couple complaints about the audio before, but I don't think it was on my side, because I'm showing perfectly fine levels, and then my wife is usually watching, and she'll let me know if there's an issue. She's watching in the other room, monitoring. So, okay, cool. Glad you got it. Good. Thank you. The downside, of course, to poly painting is that you have to subdivide the model a lot to get a lot of detail in there. So you got to get millions and millions of points in here, because you're applying the RGB to each individual point. So if you don't have enough to support the detail, then you got to either subdivide or just use it as sort of like a very basic starting place. Let's see. That's kind of cool. I like this idea, because if these things are thrashing around, these stark colors, the yellow and the black, is going to cause a lot of confusion for the whoever this guy is stabbing, Johnny Rico or whatever, and his boys. I think that's kind of a cool sort of mechanism. It's an interesting thing about insects. When you see an insect that has, very dull colored wings on the outside and very brightly colored wings on the inside. Blue morpho is a good example of that. Butterfly, or a lot of, like katydids and grasshoppers, they have this ultra camouflage, but then they open up their wings, you see this bright color. So why do you have this bright color there? Well, it's like if a predator spots the camouflaged dull colored insect, and the insect flies away, is that flash of color can often cause a fair amount of confusion, and then in the predator's mind, it could be wondering if it was looking at the same thing or not, depending on how fast it moves and chaotically it moves. So it's kind of a nice defense mechanism. So if you use color like this as a way, in fast moving parts, high contrast color can cause visual confusion. So that could be a benefit. And then, of course, there's also Batesian mimicry, which I'm sure you guys know all about. Batesian mimicry, named after the scientist Bates, not Norman Bates, who was a contemporary of Wallace and Darwin, who basically came up with the idea that, if you have an insect, and in his case, he used butterflies, that is really bad tasting or venomous, or poisonous rather. So if a predator eats it and gets sick, predators are going to associate that color pattern with bad tasting or poisonous or whatever. So it actually has a cost to produce venom or a bad taste in terms of energy. Sometimes it takes less energy for a species over the course, and I'm talking about energy over the course of evolution, not necessarily on an individual. If one insect can imitate the colors of another one, maybe this insect is not venomous or poisonous or even bad tasting, but it mimics the colors of one that is, then that basically, in the predator's mind, the predator will avoid that insect as well. So you get that benefit. These bugs don't get together and hold meetings and make decisions like consciously about it. It comes down to natural selection and that kind of thing. But it's a very kind of cool process. Batesian mimicry. I think monarch butterflies are notoriously bad tasting, and then there's a bunch of insects that mimic that color pattern. I might have that backwards, though. any lepidopterist out there can correct me. Okay, so now I got that, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to this darker color and lower my size here and just add a little bit of sharpness here, just refine these a little bit. This is probably a good time to turn off symmetry. And just make a little bit of refinement here so that they look different on the different legs, limbs. Make sure I have that correct. Sorry, I'm watching old SNL skits on YouTube. Yes, I had it right. Batesian mimicry. From it, there are harmless species evolved to imitate warning signals of harmful species. Henry Walter Bates. He's a butterfly guy. Back in the 19th century, man, all the cool kids were out in the jungle studying butterflies. So a lot of people don't know this, but Charles Darwin, as a young man, was quite the adventurer. He's actually most famous before he was really known as a naturalist. He was literally like a travel writer. He's almost like Anthony Bourdain of his time. So he's kind of like Anthony Bourdain meets Indiana Jones. He had a lot of really interesting adventures in South America with South American rebels and caballeros and all this other kind of stuff, in addition to doing scientific research. And so he had several. The Voyage of the Beagle was his famous travel book. That he had all these adventures. I've read some of it. His writing style is really, really dry for modern readers. It's like it's not super entertaining prose, but it is very interesting. But actually, a few years back, Disney acquired the rights because they wanted to make a young Darwin movie based on his life. Believe it or not, this is last I heard of it was like in 2000, I think 14 or so. No, maybe 2014 or 15. I haven't heard anything about it since. I haven't really looked it up to see if they're doing anything with it. It's a little bit terrifying to think that, Disney is going to rewrite the story of Darwin. Let's see if it'll be a musical, if he's going to have musical pigeons or finches. But there was a number of these guys back in the 19th century, that were searching for specimens in the jungle. Wallace was one of them. Bates was one of them. I think Wallace lost his entire collection when a ship caught fire. Wallace has the Malay Archipelago, which is another book that I've read most of and then didn't get around to finishing. That's a good one. Adventures in Malaysia and Indonesia and stuff. So I'm thinking I'm going to go, after I do get this down, I'm going to go over with some red and some orange to really highlight these spikes. I always like to put red on the pointy bits of the bugs. Because again, this has a tendency to scare the crap out of, would-be predators. If it looks like it's dripping with blood already, that's not a bad way to go. Not going to scare the Starship troopers, though. One thing I'm thinking I would like to do with this model, though, eventually, if I find the time, is to actually rig it and then do like a swarm of them running across the alien landscape, Glendathu or whatever it's called. That'd be kind of fun to do. This design is fairly simple, so I don't think it needs a super complicated rig. Okay, some shaping on here. Okay, let's see. That looks pretty good. Save it. And then let's add some noise. Let's do another pass with the cavity masking. Let's see. Go in here and do some surface masking, I think. Because I want more of a fine detail. So let's do the noise scale. Something like that, and then I'm going to choose mask by noise. And let's see if I invert it. Invert it again. I'm going to hide this and then just The dark gray, do color. Just a little bit like that. I think that looks cool. Save me a little bit of trouble. And then I'm going to go in here with this alpha. And let's increase the placement a little bit. And I'm going to select kind of this. I don't like that. I think instead what I will do is let's add some red. I'm going to turn on symmetry real quick just to make this a little bit faster. Do a little bit of blurring here. Some deeper red at the end. Do that. Then I'm going to go in here and again choose that dot alpha, get kind of a very bright yellow. I'm doing this kind of a super fast, well, my version of super fast. I think for really get it refined, I would go through and do several passes of different colors and differing intensities on this with this kind of technique, just so it looks a bit more organic. Like I want it to look like, pigment from a cell, not necessarily painted on, but something that suggests war paint. In this version, I'm going to do it just fast. Because this is just for fun. And also, it's good to be able to do things quickly and not get overly obsessed with doing perfection. Because if you're doing something conceptual, then, something you want to present to a client, then you have to be super fast at getting something good and understanding what's good enough to show to a client, and then you can perfect it later on. I mean, I'm not a concept artist, but I've worked with a lot of concept artists, and I know that a lot of times what they're, at least the ones that I worked with, the reality is they got to show something basically they got to show something new almost every day to the client or the director, whoever, art director or art directors plural, in order to get approval, help narrow down what they're looking for. And the nice thing about ZBrush is so fast that you can knock out something three-dimensionally very quickly to show, because you're basically just trying to get the director to sign off on the idea. You're trying to realize his or her vision for them as fast as possible. You can wait for the actual production to get in here and start to really, that's interesting, get super particular about every little brushstroke and the number of passes that you do. Because of course a lot of times concept artists do a paint over as well, Photoshop. Depends on the artist. Neville Page was actually one of the first people to really use ZBrush as a concept artist as their primary medium. It took him a long time to convince directors and other people on the production team that you could do concept art in ZBrush. This is a long time ago, like around the days of Avatar 1 that he was doing this. I took a class with him very long time ago, around that same time. I guess he was working on Avatar before Avatar came out. It was just a rumor. But he was teaching a class at Noman in concept art, and he was demonstrating both doing traditional stuff as well as ZBrush stuff in the class. It was really cool. And then I think he did a lot of stuff for Tron before they had the hard surface tools integrated into ZBrush, so he had to do everything the hard way. The reason I appreciate people like Neville and Neville Page and Scott Robertson and all these guys is those guys actually studied and practiced industrial design before getting into entertainment design. So, and you can see it, like if I tried to design a spaceship, and I've designed a few spaceships for fun in the past, but I'm just making stuff up. I don't have any of that industrial design background in my work, and so you can sort of see where it doesn't quite have the realism that you would see in somebody who actually understands the language of design for that kind of medium. But that's why I studied bugs and biology and that kind of thing, because that's where I want to put my energies, because that's what gets me more excited than, I think cars are cool and everything, but I'm not a big car guy. I overdid it a little bit here, so I'm going to knock it back with some dark colors. Let's see how that looks. Pretty cool. Only a couple pairs of legs to go. So I think it's reasonable to think that I can get this done tonight, in the next hour. Let's take a little trip. I'm going to do the legs very much the way that I did these appendages. Kind of the same thing here. I like how this guy's got bright white on the on some of the flames here to really bring them out. He's got a little bit of red there. You got little bumpities too, which is kind of cool. I didn't put bumpities on mine, but we could pretty easily. Let's save this. I'm going to go in here real quick and fix these teeth because they're kind of freaking me out. It's a separate subtool, right? Yep. That's something. Dark red color. New color. Fill object. Okay, let's do the front legs here. These are $4 million. I think 4 million is probably good. I didn't really need to get these up to, what did I get these up to? 15 million? I don't really need to be 15 million, but whatever. Let's stick with 4 million on this. And we'll do and do a little masking, Really what I need to do is come up with like a macro or something like that to make this part faster. I'm going to invert the mask there and fill this with a dark black. Dark black. Black is black. None more black. Okay, and select some of this yellow. Use the shape here as my guide for these color shapes. that, and then I think I'm gonna be kind of sparing on the. I don't want to put color on there. I want to keep them close to the joints. I think. And then, kind of like what I did before, I'm going to put some yellow here and then cover that with red later. Definitely needs red, more red overall. Okay, so let's turn off symmetry, and I'm going to select this black color and come in here and just sharpen this a little bit. Alrighty, that looks kind of good in terms of just the basic pattern. So now we'll just do a little bit of weathering on it. So what I could do is I'm going to copy the noise pattern from this subtool. So I'm going to select it and go into Surface under Noise. I'll choose Edit, and then I'm going to choose Copy and Cancel and turn this off. And then go down here to this subtool, Surface, Noise, Edit, Paste. Oops, I'm still in that subtool. Alt click on this sub switch. There we go. Edit, paste. And it'll do mask by noise. And I'm going to bring in some of this black. Do a little cavity masking because I like some of these streaks, and I'm going to bring that in there. Aspect cavity, invert, hide, and then I'll choose color, object. Just have some of that streaking in there. Get that grain as part of the color. That looks pretty cool. I'm going to clear that mask and then get a little red going in here. I'll select this red right here. It's kind of an orange. And let's switch over to this alpha right here. And turn on symmetry. Choose a darker red. And go back to the lighter red, bring down the RGB intensity a bit. And let's do this. Just on these spiky parts, I'm going to add a little bit of red here and there to draw attention to them. Okay, and then add a little bit more later, but for now I think that's pretty good. Just to break it up. And then let's do this. I'm going to switch back to that dot, choose a very light yellow. Bring up my RGB intensity, increase my placement. went too light, I think. So I'm going to save this real quick and then backtrack because I think I lost it. It doesn't look consistent with the rest of the model. So let's see, maybe it was too light of a color and too much opacity, and let's spread this out a little bit more. It's the problem with getting into hiding the other subtools too often. You start to drift a little bit away. You lose sight of it. Alrighty, let's see. I think that's okay for now. Just adding a little bit of yellow dusting here and there so it's not so black. And I might add a little bit of red as well on top of that. now. Let's save this guy. And I got one more pair of legs to do, and then I'm done. Okay, let's do it. I'll click on this, select a dark gray color, and I'll choose color. Get down nice and dark. And then just throw in some masks here and there, just to get some detail in there quickly. Light gray. Alright, bring back my square and bring down the placement. Select some of that yellow. Sorry, I'm not very talkative tonight. Let's see if this makes sense, or am I making things worse? about that. That's all right. So we're going to refine it a bit. Let's save it. Turn off symmetry. Oh, thank you. Almost done. Do a little posing, a little rendering. While I'm doing this, there's some things I think I want to add real quick, just as a final touch. So I like these little spikies that this guy has done. So I'm going to add some of that. But first, I just want to finish this paint job real quick. On that side, and then real quick, let's do this. Just make these things nice and sharp and jagged and monstrous. Trying not to run out of steam here. This has been kind of same thing for the past hour and a half. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I have that. Let's turn symmetry back on because I'm lazy. Go to that surface, noise. I should still have that same noise in the clipboard, so I'll choose paste. Yep. And then I'm going to do mask by noise and hide. And just kind of, let's get the dark gray. Let's bring down the RGB intensity and just do color. And then do that cavity mask again. There we go. Sorry, my brain is not working anymore. I'm going to invert that and do color object. That's cool. Let's do a little bit of red. So I'm going to select some of this red color and darker. Something like that. And just add a little bit of red here and there on these spikes, and it's too dark. The nice thing about doing like rendering here in ZBrush, when I get to that point with Redshift, is that in the process of rendering, if I decide that I want to change the model or add some color here or there, it's very fast to do it. I don't have to worry about UVs and importing and exporting, setting things up. I can just quickly make the change, do another render, see how I like it. So it's kind of great for that kind of thing. And then if I get something I really like, then I can make UVs and bring everything into Substance and really go to town there. But for a quick and dirty, fun time project, I think this works really well. And then I think I'm going to do this technique just to be consistent. Let's get a light color in there. slightly lighter. All right, I think we got enough color on here for the moment. I can always add a little bit more later on. I'm going to spend some time doing some rendering. The last thing I want to do, though, is like I mentioned before, is I like these little spikes that this guy has here and there. So I'm going to add that. Let's see this real quick. And I'm going to do that. Let's do this. I'm going to turn off all the poly paint and switch to my blue material here. And I'm going to switch to the Damien standard brush and set this to drag rect. Turn on symmetry. And set this to add. Oh, let's bake all the layers here. Before I do this, hopefully this won't screw up with the poly paint. Okay, cool. I'm going to bring up the Z intensity and I might change the alpha a little bit. So this alpha is a default alpha for Damien standard brush. Oh, I still want a sharp alpha, maybe something like this. No. No. I'm going to go back to the default. Whoops. Direct. See add. Yeah, something like that. turn off symmetry because that's too symmetrical. And then let's do some right here. Just here and there, some random spikities kind of help increase the aggressive look. I don't want to overdo it though. Oh yeah, I call this my crab pimple brush. So it's great for crabs and lobsters and that kind of thing. You gotta have the Damien standard, drag rect, Z add, and there you go. And play with different alphas, I think a little bit, but usually to get a nice aggressive spike, the alpha that comes with the brush works really well. So okay, don't want to overdo it. Good old restraint. Okay. Let's go back to this. See how she looks. Put on perspective. And let's. So I had weird stuff all over my screen. So I had a project set up with a shader. So I'm going to save this guy and then load that project and then bring him into the project, or her, and do some test renders and fool around with that just to call it, to finish out the night. So I'm going to open up my project. I don't need to save this project. I just want to save one more version just because I'm paranoid, Okay. Alright, so now what I'm going to do just delete all of these. Let's load my guy. Oh, I guess I didn't need to delete those. I don't know what I was thinking. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to drag and select this material. Okay. Select the material. And that'll crash ZBrush, which is exactly what I wanted to do. Of course I want to crash ZBrush. Come on. Really? Sorry, I'm running low on fumes here. Okay, let's try this again. See, RS wax material. That's the same material. Okay, so let's go in here and render. Turn on redshift render. I'm going to go in here to the material palette, dock this. I'm just guessing that it needs a little bit more reflectivity. Oh, that's okay. Let's give it a little coat. All right, I'll do a BPR render. All right, this is going to take a few minutes because it's got to load all the geometry into memory here. So yeah, those little spikes kind of help with this kind of lighting. Of course, I'm looking from the dark side. And I don't have any ground to catch the shadow. This is just an IBL in the background. Well, one thing you can do is you can use ZBrush lights with redshift. So I'm going to put this over here. Actually, that would be nice. Okay, is it going to crash again? Yep. Let's see. Did we quick save? Probably not. Let's see. Sorry about all the crashes tonight. Let's just rotate the view And this time we'll actually remember to save the tool, or save the project. I'm not crazy about the lighting, but you know, it's kind of cool to see it rendered. I think I went overboard with the coat. Let's go materials and I'm going to go back to the modifiers and bring down the coat a little bit. Oh, coat's already down. So let's bring down the reflection weight. And then bring up the coat. Kind of like it when it's backlit a little bit better. The other thing is I'm going to turn off the background. So go into light, background. It's still going to light with this IBL. I'm going to bring up the exposure a little bit, but we won't see it in the background. I turn this off. Let's render. Let's get a more impressive looking view. He's not really posed. That would make a huge difference, but let's see how this looks. It's okay. I mean, I really miss not being able to plug in a texture into the roughness. That's what makes all the difference. If it's just sort of a flat reflectivity, it's never going to be quite there, but you know, it's okay. You can do like a paint over in Photoshop or something like that. call it like a late 90s style render there. So it kind of goes with the, Starship Troopers movie, No, it's kind of like the green. Of course, can't see anything. So I'm going to go lights. And let's do this. And do the final render for tonight. So I think next week I'm going to start a new project. I'm going to declare this one done for now. So I hope you guys enjoyed to watch me modeling it and painting it. And we'll figure out something fun to do next week. I did mention somebody was asking about doing a character insect hybrid. I was thinking about doing a leaf hopper merged with a human or humanoid leaf hopper or something like that, just to be different. So I might play with that next week as a concept and see how that goes. Of course, I still have a ton of unfinished bugs that I need to do at some point. So I am glad that I added the spikes though, because you can see how much they catch the light, especially down here. So they create a nice rhythm that goes all the way up, down, and around through here. So I think it's a nice little addition and adds us a bit of aggressiveness. But these little lights there, I think, help sell the design a little bit. So I think that's kind of cool. All right, no, I swear this is the last render for tonight. It's probably gonna be too bright and too green, but we'll play with it. Yeah, that's way too green. That brings out the detail nicely in the face. But yeah, gotta break up that specular tech. It's too flat. That's what's keeping it from looking really realistic. So for that reason, that's a case for taking this over to Substance and creating some real textures and some UVs, and that kind of thing. And I think it's a decent enough model that I might want to do that. I'll probably refine the textures a bit more too, because this still looks like car paint in a way, the flames. So I might want to make it look a little bit more interesting. But I think it came out pretty well overall. It's my own take on this model. It's one of the models that I've been wanting to do for many years and just haven't found the time for it. So it was nice to be able to do that in this particular situation. So thanks for joining my live stream. Hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have a good week. Stay away from the doom scrolling. Do something artistic. Get out of the house. Get away from the computer. And if you are stuck in the computer, watch some Josh Johnson. That'll keep you sane. So. And also start thinking about Halloween. Most important thing. Got to keep the fundamentals. Think about that Halloween.